Hello there, and welcome to episode 14 of Nothing Else Matters, a music podcast that is setting out to try and establish what we think are the 100 greatest albums ever made. To do that, we are using the current Rolling Stone 100 greatest albums list, and from there, we are selecting the ones we like, the ones we vote out. We will start to fill some gaps in with those somewhere down the line. I think we've done about 65 so far, and about 62% have been voted yes. So we're sort of rattling through them. So we've got another five to review tonight. And before we do that, we'll do some introductions. So we have with us tonight George. Good evening, George. How are we doing?
Not bad, mate.
Good man to see you. And we have Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Long time
Hello.
no see.
I know. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
We also have a guest tonight. You know, we'll have some guests on. So our guest tonight is Jack Fagan. And Jack is a singer, songwriter, musician who we love very much, who's been releasing some music under the solo project Goliath recently, and some cracking stuff in there. And I think George actually had the pleasure of seeing him live recently as well.
Yeah, saw his debut live and it was phenomenal. Do go and see this lad.
So sorry I missed it.
A few wee mistakes, unfortunately.
No
mistakes. It was perfect.
No having it. Very, very good. Enjoyed it. Loved it.
Fingers crossed we'll get to one day. Jack, thanks very much, mate, and delighted you're here, and looking forward to getting your input. I'm sure we'll have some fun with it. Okay, without further ado, let's crack on. So the first one on the list tonight is number 35 from the Rolling Stone list, which is the Beatles' Rubber Soul. First time we've had the Beatles on the list so far. So the Rolling Stone comments were, producer George Martin described Rubber Soul as, quote, the first album to present a new, growing Beatles to the world. And so it was. The first of what was to be a series of huge leaps forward with each album. Rubber Soul opens with the comic character study Drive My Car, and is suffused with Bob Dylan's influence on I'm Looking Through You, You Won't See Me, and Norwegian Wood, in which John Lennon sings about sex with a humour and candour alike any rock and roller before, and George Harrison lays down Rock's first sitar solo. Harrison called Rubber Soul, quote, the best one we made, because we were suddenly hearing sounds that we weren't able to hear before. So that's the summary from Rolling Stone of Rubber Soul. It was released on the 3rd of December 1965, and George is going to take us away on this one. All yours, mate.
Okay, obviously, I've mentioned once or twice that I might be a bit of a Beatles fan, and I find this is where the Beatles started moving from being an excellent pop band into something quite sublime. It must have come out about 6 months or so after the Help soundtrack, so to have those two monumental records in such a short period of time still blows my mind. But I think this is where the Beatles started going stratospheric. No Sgt. Pepper. This is the moment where the sounds and the lyrical content, sonic bravery, invention really started to kick in. 9 months after they did this, they did Revolver. So within a period of how many, a year and a bit, they'd Help, Rubber Soul, and Revolver. It's quite remarkable. Go through some of the songs. Norwegian Wood's got one of the greatest stories ever commit to record. It's brilliant. There's so much snark and archness on this, particularly for Lennon and George Harrison. The Think for Yourself, the Fuzzbox borrowed for the Stones for Think for Yourself. If I Needed Someone on this as well. There's so much on this album that captured the zeitgeist and influenced almost everything that came after it, including themselves. There's, Girl, phenomenal song, really brilliant tune. But they sort of mock their own importance at times in this. The word is like this, I really like the word because it's Lennon sort of putting himself up as a messiah right before he does this "we're bigger than Jesus" thing. This is the moment he does it, and I think he's mocking himself. The weakest track on it for me is what Goes On. It's utter
with Ringo.
Oh, it's fucking dog muck, man. Honestly, it's such it sticks out terribly. It's like a blue plaster and a beautiful naked model. It's like,
Yeah.
no, get this to fuck, seriously. The thing is, you've got that right beside songs like Michelle, you know, In My Life.
Michelle is like one of the best songs on that album, in my opinion.
It's phenomenal. Those tracks, the backing vocals on those tracks, I'm like, I could listen to the isolated backing vocals of those songs, of all the songs on this album, on their own, and I'd be absolutely happy, except for What Goes On. So take What Goes On and maybe Run for Your Life out, and it's, for me, probably top 3 Beatles album. It's that good.
Okay, it's interesting. So it's the first one we've had on the list. I think it was their 6th studio album, the first one we've had to review, and I think there's probably another 4 to come on the list. So obviously we get their money's worth with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're right, George. Big change, soundtrack, album, a sort of proper album as well. You know, it's kind of got a bit of a feeling, a mood and stuff to it, hasn't it? Which was different to just having a sort of group of songs put together.
Yeah.
Very, very Lennon-centric, I think, as well, most of the album.
Well, even things like Drive My Car, the album opens up with Drive My Car, but up to this point, you'd never heard a song like Drive My Car on a, maybe something for the Kinks, possibly, but this was so out there. The feel of it's not like anything you'd heard prior to this.
No, I agree with that entirely. Okay, we'll touch on some other stuff there. Bless you, Jack. Lisa, tell us about Rubber Soul.
Rubber Soul. For me, it's. I think for me, it was maybe, I don't remember it growing up, and we always had the Beatles on, and I really don't remember it. And I think it was possibly overshadowed by Sgt. Pepper, and has been for a lot of people for a long time. We bought it in vinyl quite recently, and been listening to it a lot more. I think it's a great album. I think the tunes are fantastic. As George said, they've kind of changed in their style. They've gone from the kind of holding my hand to the more songs about sex rather than the sort of teeny bop type stuff.
Having affairs and setting fire to bathrooms.
What's that, sorry?
Having affairs and setting fire to bathrooms.
Yeah, well, they're kind of grown up. They've had a wee bit more experience than when they first started out, and their good wee haircuts and their suits and all the rest of it. So yeah, there's a bit more experience shown here and a bit more creativity, I think. And yeah, I do like it. It's not my favourite Beatles album, but that's quite a hard choice to make anyway, because what can you say about the Beatles? They're absolutely marvellous. You know, I'm a big Beatle fan. This isn't my favourite, but I'm not sure about top 100s.
Okay.
But should the Beatles always be in the top 100? Maybe every single album they do should be.
Not unless we vote it out. Not at all.
Unless we vote it out. Maybe Jack might have something to say about this.
I'm sure he will.
I'm looking forward to seeing what Jack's got to say about it.
So we had, as George says, we had some stuff early in the year, and I think 64 and into 65 was a big change for them. They did a sort of America the first time, really, did the whole Dylan meet-up, played these big Shea Stadiums and stuff like that, so that, they were maturing at a rate of knots, and this was the first time they'd actually sort of time off the road to make an album. They usually sort of used to record it in between touring and stuff like that, which you can sort of feel as if they've had a bit more time to kind of get their head around it. And before we bring Jack in, the thing that I didn't quite realise, which I guess I should have done, was that when the day they released the album, they also released Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out. There's a AA single, but not
which
on the album.
On the album. They did that a lot, actually. They could have taken 2 of those songs off and put Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out on this album, and it would have been absolute top 3 album of all time.
Maybe they should have done that.
Apart from Ringo's, obviously.
Had you listened to me?
Apart from Ringo's. Jack, tell me about Rubber Soul, mate. What do you think?
So I think Rubber Soul is a very good album, and I definitely appreciate the direction that it pushed the Beatles in, because right afterwards we get Revolver, which is this gorgeous, mature piece of work with excellent writing on all parts and production from George Martin that's totally revolutionary. And I appreciate that this is the between album for that direction, the maturing of the band.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like about 2 or 3 songs on this album that I would say I don't love. And I think that in itself is enough for me to not put it in the top 100, because there's Beatles albums that deserve that spot more. Like Revolver, actually.
Okay. And the songs that you do love, they're not good enough to offset that. I don't think there's not been many sort of perfect albums we've reviewed so far. I think even the best ones have had the odd one that we've been, you know, a bit of a filler type thing. So are the ones that are very good not good enough to balance the maybe 2 or 3 that you're not so keen on?
Well, Michelle is like one of my favorite Beatles tracks. I think it might be particularly the rundown that's happening while he's playing the guitar, the way it moves and flows with the track. But even the love for that track is not enough to justify it beating out other Beatles albums that deserve the spot more.
So we do get 4 more Beatles albums. So I'm not sure. I know you've mentioned Revolver, but we get Peppers. I think we get White Album and Abbey Road. I think.
Aye.
So you know all the big hitters I think are there, but I don't know. Maybe is it any of the earlier stuff that you would sort of suggest might merit inclusion?
I don't believe so.
No.
I think a lot of the lyrical, melodic, and syllabic developments that came through as they developed as a band really pushed them, and some of the earlier stuff is maybe lacking that.
Okay, perfect. All right, can imagine huge 8 weeks #1. Read up on it that the day they launched the album, they were playing the old Glasgow Odeon hall. Yeah, I know. What's the chances? I know, mate. I was born in '65, so I could have snuck along. I think at 6 months old or whatever, and got to see it. So you know, it was huge. And everything they'd done at this point was huge, both UK and America. But the interesting thing was they appeared to kind of take their audience with them, because obviously they were maturing at a rate of knots. But they stopped being a sort of singles pop band and obviously became more of a kind of albums band. And as you say, Josh, probably them and Dylan maybe set the tone for albums coming through at this time, rather than, you know, just albums with great songs on it, if that makes sense. Mentioned it was Harrison's debut favourite album. Elvis Costello's got a brilliant quote. Says something, you know, I think says he was 10 or 11 when it came out, and he says he heard the album and broke his heart, thought it was the worst thing he'd ever heard. Until about 6 weeks later, and then he couldn't stop playing it. You know, he says he changed his life. He couldn't believe these guys were as clever as they are. And the only other thing I picked up was that Nowhere Man was, I think, the first song that they wrote that wasn't any sort of boy-girl relationship. It was, you know, everything else had some affiliation to something to do with romance or relationships, and Nowhere Man didn't. It was a kind of third party.
Well, it's another one. It's an extension of John Lennon's help. You know, he was the cry for help. He just didn't know what was going on in his life. He was struggling to comprehend the level of fame that he was, you know, dropped into, and I think that was an extension of that. And it's such a great song. The first refrain just gets me every, you know, that you don't know what you Nowhere Man, please listen, you don't know what you're missing. I hear that and I just melt. It's one of the absolute, you know, perfect moments in recorded history. It's a great document for me of 4 guys who just, you know, they're not far off Jack's age, and they were the most famous people on the planet. And it happened so quickly. Everything, we go back to this with the Beatles again, and everything you know that's recorded from the Beatles, from the 4 Beatles, was recorded within a 6.5 year period. Everything. It's madness. It's nuts. And it changed the world. There's no getting away from the fact that it changed not just music, but culture, life, how people dressed, how people spoke to authority. It was, you know, the Beatles as a band are, you know, the most groundbreaking collection of artists that, at least the 20th century ever knew.
Yeah, wouldn't disagree with a lot of that. And it's the beginning of that classic run. I think we talked one of the previous episodes about Stevie Wonder, who we'll come on to later. And he had this sort of classic 70s run of records. And the Beatles from here on their studio records, pretty much to say Abbey Road, I would say, kind of hit that sweet spot as well, didn't they?
Constant. It was just every album for me was of a level that you were like, okay, if you get a bad song on it, like What Goes On, I'll go back to What Goes On again. If you get a dog, a wee steaming dog turd, it really stands out. If the album wasn't as good, then you would have just like, yeah, okay, it's another song. But because the album itself, in my opinion, is so good, those stand. It's the Ziggy Stardust one. What was the one last week? Ziggy Stardust. We were talking about. There's one song that just, get that out of there. It just doesn't fit.
It was easy. It was
it
a cover,
easy.
wasn't
Get
it?
easy out there, and it's almost a perfect album.
Yeah, we had Robert Christie said from the Village Voice, it's twice as good as anything else they or anyone else had done at that point, with the exception of the Stones, maybe. And that probably does stand the test of time. The other thing I picked up was that because it was released late in '65, it wasn't the best-selling album of the year. It was the third best-selling album of the year.
What was it beaten out by?
Sound of Music.
Sound of Music. Absolutely. Sound of Music. In the UK and the US, by the way. But it was also Sound of Music beat it, and Beatles for Sale beat it, because that was also 65, George. Early on, or late 64, sorry.
Late 64, yeah.
It sold through 65. But it was third best album in 65, but actually it was third best album in 66 as well.
There you go. Kept selling.
So it had Rubber Soul, it had Revolver, Beat It, and The Sound of Music again. So
really?
Absolutely, yeah. So again, I'm money's worth.
That better not be in the top 100. I'll be very
It's a soundtrack. We've not done soundtracks, have we? So
if that happens, I'm saying goodbye, farewell. If we do.
Okay, let's have a wee vote on it. So a couple of our guests come in with votes. We had, and we've got John, obviously. Mr. Welsh's votes were interesting. So John's a yes for the Beatles. I think everyone was a yes. Chris was a yes. David Ross was a yes, and Graham was a yes as well, and so was Martin, for that matter. David said the creative difference between Rubber Soul and Beatles for Sale, exactly a year in release dates, is astonishing. Down to them experimenting and listening to Dylan, etc. This is the sound of genius being born, which I think is kind of pretty much on the money. So, so I've got a few yeses kicking about there. So George, we started with you, mate. What's your take on that?
100% yes in.
It's 100% up. Lisa?
I'm going yes.
You're going less. You were wavering there. You're in now.
As I said, I just can't see myself not voting the Beatles.
Yeah. I'm glad we don't have an album of Ringo covers to review or something. More difficult. Jack, what's your thoughts, mate?
That would be a no.
That's a no from you. So it's a qualified no, I think. So Beatles fan, but they did better, I think, was your take, yeah. Cool.
That's it, Jack. I'm never playing your music on the radio again.
Oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. I said I liked the album. I said I appreciate what it did for them. He can't do that.
Yeah, don't listen to him, Jack.
Don't listen. He's the old curmudgeon. He's the one that gets grumpy. Okay, and that was a yes as well. I do think they've maybe got a better album out there, but I think it's a great album, particularly the Lennon stuff. My last take on that is that I didn't quite realise when he wrote In My Life, I think he was 24 when he wrote it. It feels like something you write at Johnny Cash age or something like that, doesn't it? Yeah. It's amazing. I picked up one other thing, which was they toured obviously in '66, which was their last tour, but there's a little video clip on YouTube of the first date of that tour, which is live at the Circus Krone in Germany, which was the first date they played. And it's interesting because they played 5 or 6 songs on it, but it's like a kind of career review almost. It kind of starts off with rock and roll music, and then it sort of rattles through I Feel Fine, Baby in Black, Day Tripper, Nowhere Man, Yesterday, and going I'm Down. So it kind of, you can almost see that arc as they're as they're doing it. And I think they do them all in about 15 minutes or something. So
Yeah, it's battered through it, yeah.
oh, mental. Cool. Okay. Well, we're in there. So Beatles to start. So we're jumping around slightly here. We're going to do number 32 on the list. So just let me get my notes up. So 32 is Beyonce with Lemonade. So our summary of Beyonce from Rolling Stone is 9 times out of 10 I'm in my feelings, Beyonce announced on her heartbreak masterpiece Lemonade. She dropped the album on a Saturday night surprise, knocking the world sideways, her most expansive and personal statement, tapping into marital breakdown and the state of the nation. It was a different side than she's shown before, raging over infidelity and jealousy, but reveling in the militant feminist funk strut of Formation. All over Lemonade, she explores the betrayals of American blackness, claiming her place in all of America's music traditions. She goes outlaw country on Daddy's Lessons, she digs blues metal with Jack White on Don't Hurt Yourself, she revamps the Yeah Yeah Yeahs on Hold Up, Ashes to Ashes, Dust to Side Chicks, All Hail the Queen. So that's Rolling Stone's take on it. It was released on a wonderful date, the 23rd of April. That was to be my birthday, 2016. And this is the second Beyonce album that we've reviewed. So we will get Jack to take us on this one. Tell us about Lemonade, mate.
All right, okay. So I was quite surprised because I've not listened to much Beyonce, actually. I was quite surprised when I listened to this album to the sheer quality that's shown throughout in terms of writing, in terms of production, and the emotional content within as well. So it's also got a video series that that goes alongside it, and it basically outlines this show of developing emotions, denial of her husband's infidelity, and finding out the truth. And as you go through the album, each track accompanies a certain emotion, which is quite a genius way to put out an album. I've never seen something quite like it, but and yeah, it has some of the best writers in pop music on it. I don't know if you know the number of people that worked on it. Do any of you know?
It's got to be in the hundreds.
It's
Quite a few.
It's 72 people.
72.
I know quite a lot of that is interpolation, but it did also have a lot of writers that I'm very fond of. One of the interpolations used is Noah Lennox, if you know who Noah Lennox is.
No?
I don't.
That would be Panda Bear's real name.
All right.
Do you know Panda Bear?
Yeah.
Oh, Panda Bear. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah.
No, I don't. Sorry, mate. I'm joking.
I don't know
Please.
what people know.
Please inform us who
Please
Panda
do.
Bear is.
Of
We're
Animal
showing our age
Collective.
here.
Animal
I'm
Collective.
sure, mate. I accept that.
Animal Collective, I think, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Panda Bear is one of the leading members of Animal Collective.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, yeah, we've got Jack White informing some of the kind of.
I know Jack White. Right.
And don't hurt yourself. No. We've got Father John Misty of Fleet Foxes fame, who famously co-writes with, if I remember correctly, it's Lana Del Rey. He's a common co-writer alongside her. And so there's just a lot of really great musicians informing the direction of this album. And of course, in interviews, Jack White actually attests that she directs everyone. If someone comes up with a part, she knows exactly where to place it, and no parts are wasted. The moment she hears it, she knows what to do with it, which is, I mean, if Jack White says it, I'll believe it. He's a fucking sensational musician. So, Hold Up, as you said earlier, samples the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and it has this beautiful ethereal intro backing vocal that slowly develops into a kind of woeful song about kind of rage and denial of the infidelity of what's his name, Jay-Z.
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 That's a running joke, that one. Yeah.
Have you done any Jay-Z songs on the
Yes, we have.
We voted Jay-Z in.
Did you?
We did.
I didn't.
Moisty
I
George's
don't think
shagging.
I did either.
So you have to join the podcast, guys, you see.
We've got Kendrick Lamar on
Yeah.
Freedom, which
This
is
is great. Yeah.
it's a
Amazing.
great song.
Yeah.
Forward is a great example of moving on from the infidelity. It's all about how she's had to accept it and rebuild it, and it's accompanied by in the video. Do you know the Japanese bowls that they put together with gold?
Yeah.
It's accompanied with that imagery, which I think is a really nice piece of imagery to go alongside it.
You sound as if you're a bit of a fan here, Jack.
I'm loving this album.
Good.
I can't deny it. Also, it shows the song "Daddy Lessons" is all about how her father raised her to be tough and independent, but in doing so, directed her towards men like him,
Oh, yeah.
which ended up, in this case, very clearly hurting her. And only a few years prior to the release of this album, actually, her father cheated on her mother, and they divorced. So this album, that song in particular, goes back on it, and she has to kind of reconcile the issues with her father during the process of reconciling her marriage.
Perfect. There's a lot in there, isn't there? But I think
There's a lot to analyze.
We reviewed the previous Beyonce album, and we kicked it about a bit. I think there was a few in, but we voted it out. And my chat was that we knew there was another one coming, so we're hoping that when we got a chance to do that one, it would be worth listening to again. So it sounds as if you enjoyed it, mate, which is great. Brilliant news, thank you, Lisa. I'm guessing here, but am I guessing you're a Beyonce fan?
Right, well,
No, I was guessing.
I've not really been much of a Beyonce fan. Maybe I've just not listened enough. Maybe just grouped her in with a whole type of singers before that I've not really paid much attention to. But I have to say that I absolutely loved this album. I was really, really impressed by it. What a powerhouse of really strong songs. And what a powerful character she is and herself. And a bit like Amy, you know, her songs are written about, you know, personal experience. But she does it in a very different way, you know, because she's just so much more confident in herself. You know, you don't mess with Queen Bee, but there's that vulnerability there as well. You know, the song "Sorry," she says, you know, it's so sort of emotive. You know, suicide before you see this tear, what's fall down from my eyes. You know, and it's like whoa, it's quite a statement. You know, that's her just letting him know. And then at the end of that, she says, you know, what are you doing, my love? You know, there's this questioning there. And then I really liked Pray You Catch Me. That's another one where she's bearing her soul, you know, when she says, I thought that was a great line. She says, you can taste the dishonesty, it's all over your breath. You know, what a fantastic lyric, you know. I really liked the songs that she did with Jack White. I think that took her out of her comfort zone, you know, but obviously they've worked together on it, but it just created a really different sound for her. And also with Kendrick Lamar, I really liked those songs on it. I thought it was a brilliant, and Formation, Freedom, Tour de Force of songs.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that.
And the video for me is quite it's quite something actually. And you know, and she says, you know, she's talking about her race and her pride, and she says, you know, I like my Negro nose and my Jackson 5 nostrils. And then of course you get at the end quite a powerful image of the little boy dancing in front of the row of riot police. You know, and the graffiti comes up, stop shooting us. So there's a lot of things going on in this album.
Yeah, and she quotes, I mean, there's a lot of personal stuff, but, you know, she quotes Malcolm X in one of the songs as well. There's a big, heavy undercurrent, sort of social, political stuff in there. This was the year that she guested on at the Super Bowl halftime show and did a kind of Black Panther styled sort of song sing-along with Coldplay and various other people, but everything about her was all about sort of making this statement at the time, and it certainly comes across in the record. Some of the songs are amazing on it. George, Beyonce, Lemonade.
Yeah, we had a Beyonce album on, as you said early on in the 100, and it was all right. It was fine. I think David Ross was on that night, and we were talking about Beyonce's maybe more of a live event. You know, the Beyonce experience is probably best served live. So I went into this, and I only listened to it today, actually. I'd never heard the album before. And I can take a lead, Beyonce. I have great respect for the last three. I think she's a very talented, pop performer and musician. She is a bit of a force of nature. But, as a singer, she's not a virtuoso. As a songwriter, I felt that, maybe she was too much the tool of a producer or a section or collection of producers. I've seriously underestimated this girl after listening to that day. I was blown away with this album. It was nothing that I expected. Every song had something that made me go, "What the hell is that?" The variety, the depth of the lyrics, it caught me. There's a few times I was like, I'm in the car driving and I'm listening to it. I'm thinking, holy crap, this is. I need to give this the respect that it deserves. I need to really go back to this and listen to this. So I'm only commenting on this from one listen, and it is absolutely, in 49 minutes, it's completely changed me from being somebody who doesn't mind Beyonce to someone who's like, I need to find out more about this, because this ticked so many boxes for
George,
me.
that's exactly how I felt. And don't you think that
Yeah.
our vocals in this are incredible? And
She's
sometimes
not.
her voice is soaring, and other times it's vulnerable.
But what I
It's-
like about it is that she's not showy. It's not showy. She's not doing it like Whitney Houston used to do it. And, it's like, look how good, or Mariah Carey, for instance, like similar big super acts, they're showing you how good. They're like, hang on a second, watch me. I'm going to show you how good I am. She's not doing this. She's letting the song tell the story. And it really, it caught me on a number of occasions during that hour I listened to it. There was so much in it, I could hear things. I know Jack's hearing things from, was it the Animal Collective, which I put my hands up, I don't know. But I was hearing things like, there was like 60s records in there. And there was Led Zeppelin, and there was obviously Jack White. But the stuff she did with Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd, she did stuff with one of the guys for second song. Yeah, the second song's got all the 60s kind of vibe to it, Hold Up.
Yeah.
Had Ezra Koenig, who was from the Vampire Weekend.
I saw that as well. I mean, the music he makes is awesome, and the track shows that.
Honestly,
is that the one where they can't get used to using you sample in it as well? I think
that's the one. That's Hold Up. Yeah.
So clever.
It really was, and I was like, where are they taking this? But every time she opened her mouth, there was something inventive. So if it wasn't just inventive, it was, it carried more resonance. So then I ended up reading about it, because I didn't know about Jai Z. I'm going to call him Jai Z because I have little respect for him now. Because of what he did to her. That is fucking appalling, man.
Yeah, that's...
so she has went up levels for me today, finding out more about this album. So it really resonated on a number of levels, and it's such a good album. I feel ashamed to say that I didn't know it before, and I'm going to rectify that in future. I'm going to go and look at the videos as well, because they sound phenomenal.
The first track, Hold Up, is a video of her reciting poetry while drowning in a room, and it begins like the song actually begins with the doors opening and the water going out, because as she's drowning, she's denying that he's done anything and she's blaming herself, and then she opens the door and accepts that it's his fault, not hers. It's a gorgeous piece of music, and it's also got a great piece of imagery to go along with it. It's a stunning experience.
I will definitely go back to this album, but I'll go back to it with the videos as well, because that'll probably enlighten me more. But I have to say, I was absolutely taken aback by how good this was.
Yeah, me too, George. I'm not going to add much to that. I can believe it's 49 minutes, I think, and it absolutely flew by when I listened to it, and loved all the songs that he's referred to there.
Yep.
I think there's a song called Sandcastles that I actually had to stop and listen to.
Yeah.
I can believe how, cause it was kind of so light, if you want, or so
Yep.
honest. The whole thing was great. Absolutely loved it. Felt a bit guilty that, you know, you do tar some people with a brush, I guess, and I was definitely wrong. Albeit I've liked her, but not to this
No,
level.
likewise, it was. I felt similar to what David Ross was saying about, you know, I can imagine going to a Beyonce concert and really enjoying the spectacle of it. But this has made me go, have a listen to her. Don't underestimate her.
Yep, agreed. And she's huge, so I won't go through all the things that she's achieved. But the one thing I did think was interesting was in America, she's the only artist ever to have her first 6 albums go in at #1 to Billboard. Which you have to shift a lot of art records pretty quickly
Yeah,
to do that,
absolutely.
and more power to her for doing all that as well. You mentioned her singing. Rolling Stone said that she's the 8th greatest singer ever. Okay, so
No.
Where do they place Amy?
3, 2, 1. You want to have a go at any 3, 2, 1 from the Rolling Stone
Ella
list?
Fitzgerald.
Ella.
She's not in the 3, but she's in there, but she's not top 3.
Aretha.
Nina Simone.
Aretha's #1. Yeah.
Nina.
Aretha is always #1. Always.
No.
Any of the Andrew sisters? Well, they're good singers.
They are good. They are good
Great
singers.
singers, yeah, but they're
You have
not.
to split them
Two was Whitney, and 3 was
No.
Sam Cooke.
Is Amy Winehouse even in there?
Sam Cooke's great.
Top 20, I think. Amy, not.
Oh,
not-
that's.
Well, we can rectify that in a minute, mate. Okay, so I mean, no great surprise based on previous chats that the Beatles Twitter was sort of big fans of the Beatles, and certainly weren't fans of this record. And back to what you said, George, about you genuinely have got to listen to some of these records before you can take a view on them. Not
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've enjoyed most about Nothing Else Mattress is it's forced me to listen to things that I necessarily wouldn't have went to, and I've gained from it. It's obviously made me think I'll never listen to a Metallica record again, but I will listen to more Beyonce.
Yeah,
But they gave us the name of our podcast. We have to
did.
give them that.
They did.
They
That's it, though.
That
Beyond
is-
that, that's it.
Okay, so we had David liked it but didn't vote it in. Chris was fine about it, didn't think it was a top 100. Graham didn't know it. Martin didn't know it. John loves it, so John's in
Good.
with it. So
Good.
we'll come round the houses on us. So we started with Jack. Jack,
Oh yeah, easily. Like that's a 9 out of 10 album.
I'm taking that, mate.
9 out of 10.
I think it's a 9 out of 10.
We're
I
taking
think
that.
it remains up there.
Good.
Lisa,
Oh, a definite yes for me.
George.
I would say it's about a 9.3.
Oh, okay, a bit more generous.
I'm in that kind of mood at the moment, mate.
It's a very good. It is a very good album. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely in, and I'm a wee bit surprised that I'm so convinced it's a 100 album, but I genuinely am. I think it's great. So cool. We're in with 2 there. Can we get a magic full house tonight, guys? Let's never had one. Let's see how we do. Okay, so we're going to go to number 33 now, which is Amy Winehouse, Back to Black. Okay, Rolling Stones. With her love of 60s girl group pop and her dark beehive, Amy Winehouse came across as a star from another time. But as a child of the 90s, she openly loved hip-hop and wrote openly about her splattered relationships and issues with drugs and alcohol. Her breakthrough second album marked the arrival of a resplendently damaged 21st century torch singer. Tracks like the mildly pushy You Know I'm No Good and the sumptuous Love Is a Loving Game had an elegant, beguiling smudginess that avoided the wax museum quality of so much retro soul. My odds are stacked, Winehouse sings, I go back to black. Indeed, the pain and tumult in her voice was very real. Before her death in 2011, she left behind a tragically unfulfilled promise. So that was the Rolling Stone. Back to Black was released 27th October 2006. Lisa.
Oh, Amy.
Oh, Amy.
Oh, Amy. Do you know the sad thing, but one of the saddest things I think is that people remember her for is just being the tabloid press. absolute obsession with her and splashing her all over the front pages, you know, every time she got something wrong. And I think we need to try and avoid looking at it from that point of view, although I do know that obviously the songs are from, written from her personal demons, her relationships, the turmoil, the loss, the addiction. But I think this is quite an incredible album. And as you said, she came from a jazz background, but she loved all the kind of 60s, like Shirelles, Ronettes kind of music. And you can really hear that in her music. She's managed to put that together so well with like Mark Ronson. But I think what's interesting about this album are the contrasts. So you've got this wonderful music and production, yet you've got Amy with this incredible sort of contralto voice that's like nothing you've ever heard, really. I mean, and I think it's because you don't expect to hear what you're hearing. The lyrics are crushingly honest. You know, when she talks about her infidelity, her addiction, she's an incredibly flawed character and very vulnerable, but she knows it. And I just find that her lyrics are just so, I don't know, it's hard to say. I think it's quite emotional, you know, at such a young age. She was so smart that she even had a bit of that sort of self-deprecating humour. I'm kind of rambling on a bit here. So, I mean, Rehab, she just comes in totally defiant, and you know, it's like, okay, I've got a problem, but she knows her own weakness is that she doesn't want to go to rehab because, you know, she might miss out. She's got FOMO, you know, she might not see her man, and she's quite kind of like, well, look, I admit it, you know, I probably should, but I'm not gonna. And it's not just pride, she says, it's just until these tears have dried, you know, it's like a crutch until she can deal with the other things that are going on with her life. You Know I'm No Good is just an absolute, probably my favourite song in the album. Absolutely a cracking song. The beat, the rhythm, it's so catchy. Yeah, you know, she's the one we've been talking about Beyonce and infidelity, and in this song, she's the one that's cheating.
Yeah.
And then she finds herself a wee bit kind of like, you know, I'm cheating myself here because her man is like, oh, I'm not that, you know, I'm not so bothered. You know, he sees the carpet burn and he just shrugs. And she says, you shrug and it's the worst. Who truly stuck the knife in first? You know, so this is a kind of like, you know, I might think I'm out here having a good time, but actually this really hurts as well because he doesn't really care that much either. I just think it's all quite incredible stuff for such a young girl to have written. Me and Mr. Jones, it starts off with that sort of characteristic 60s vein. And, you know, she says, nobody comes between me and my man.
Yeah.
And then suddenly she says, what kind of fuckery is this? So, you know, you've got these profanities coming through this, you know, typical 60s style. The music's almost waltzing while she's talking about that kind of thing. And she says, you don't mean dick to me, you know. So there's this real filthy language going on as well. And you're really not expecting it. So I think it's these contrasts that makes it such an interesting album for me.
Does that song
ultimately, sorry?
Does that song not have the line, you're my favourite black Jew? No, my second favourite black Jew. There's some odd lyrics.
Yeah.
There's some serious stuff going on in there. But
so you're a fan, yeah?
Well, I am a fan.
Yeah. I'm quite right too.
I kind of warbled on a bit because I think there's just so much
No.
I wanted to say about her and didn't really I think it's the fact that, you know, it really worked between her and Mark Ronson, getting this kind of sound that she wanted. But then there's that kind of like American sounding music, yet this very British kind of, you know, self-deprecating humour going on in there as well, where she completely accepts, you know, her own flaws. And ultimately it's tragic because, you know, she does look at maybe moving forward, and she didn't really get to see that.
Yeah, no, she didn't, because it was her second album, but obviously her sort of final album in sort of real time. And probably became a lot more famous maybe after she wasn't here anymore, which is a shame. But okay, thanks, Lisa. So recorded London, Miami, and New York, I think. So there was a sort of fair backstory to it. I liked a bit where she was demoing in London, and she used to take the demo tapes out of her dad's taxi. My dad would play them as he was driving around London to get feedback from the people in the back of the cab to the songs, and then they would take that back and they would mess about with the demos again and stuff, which I really liked, because she's very much part of that Camden sort of London scene. Okay, George, back to black.
As someone who is very close to that Camden London scene,
absolutely.
I've got full disclosure here. My own experiences with Amy Winehouse were difficult. But I'll talk about the album first. I first seen Amy Winehouse, I think she did an album called Frank, a couple of years before. And she was all right. I quite liked the style, but it felt quite, it didn't feel substantial enough. And then I saw her again, and I don't generally watch the Jules Holland show, but I was incapacitated at the time. I had a ruptured knee, assisting my knee ruptured, so I was like basically stuck at home and I couldn't do anything. And she was on the Jules Holland show, I think it might have been the New Year one, doing Rehab, and it blew me away. And I was like, I need to get this album. And I was working and, you know, spending a lot of time in Camden Town at the time. People knew her. I knew people who knew her. So when I got the album, I probably got it at the start of 2007. Probably from that point on, I don't think I listened to another album as much for the rest of the year. I listened to it almost on a daily basis, to the point where it was like I knew every note on it. It blew me away. And
why was that, George? What do you think? You took
the quality of the writing, primarily the songs. You know me, I'm a pop man, and songs are my thing. If you can write good songs, I'll forgive almost anything. And she wrote a collection of some of the best songs that I've seen in the 21st century. They're that good. You know, I don't want to pick up on too many of the songs in particular, because, you know, you can go through them all. Rehab's just classic. You've got Sharon Jones's Dap Kings playing on that one. It's just a great 60s retro throwback. You know, I'm no good. You know, you've got Lisa mentioned there a minute ago, but the lyrics is some of the most, they're painful to listen to at times. There's, you know, what kind of fuckery is this on Me and Mr. Jones? It's just got so much swagger, and that's what she had. But then she drops back to black, and it's that could have been done by the Crystals or the Shangri-Las back in 1963. It carries so much weight, and it gave me goosebumps in 2007, even more so later on. But you know, you've got Tears Drying Their Own, which is basically a note for note lift of Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. It's a straight lift, but she sings a new lyric and a new melody over the top of it. But the song...
They ended up co-crediting, didn't they, with Ashford and Simpson? Yeah.
Simpson, they have to be credited, because she didn't, you know, there was no intention to sort of hide it. This is her take on it, and it's a great vocal and a great melody, you know, on top of that music. But the killer song for me on the whole album is "Love Is a Losing Game." And anybody that says, there was a couple of people on Twitter who were like, "Yeah, Amy Winehouse, you know, she's only big with it's only the hype since she died."
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself, man. Seriously, go take a fuck to yourself. Listen to that song and tell me that's not a major talent. Singing and writing, that is fucking. Sammy Cahn, Johnny Mercer would have killed to have written that. That's how good that is.
That song is devastating, isn't it?
I can't listen to it now.
Absolutely devastating.
I can't. So the album, when I listened to the album a couple of days ago, it was the first time I'd listened to the whole thing, probably since she died. And I saw her. I used to see her quite a lot at the station. So she's a middle class girl who was like a superstar, but she hung about outside my station at night. Her and her pals would hang outside a booty wine on the Kentish Town Road beside the Camden station. And my experiences with her were generally all right. She was not much hassle to me, but to some of my colleagues, she could be a pain in the arse.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd see her infrequently, and it's like she was just part of the furniture at Camden Town. She just was there because she worked there, she lived there, she drank there, socialised. She was there all the time. At night time, you'd see her bopping about and stuff. But 2 weeks before she died, I was standing at the bottom of the escalators at Camden Town directing traffic as part of my evening shift. And I heard this voice shout out, "Next Charing Cross train, mate." And I was like, platform 2, and I turned around and it was her. And she was with some fella she was with. She was very, very frail. And she went, "Thanks, lover." That's the last time I spoke to her.
Wow. 2 weeks before.
About 2 weeks before she died. And but she was my experiences with her were generally pretty decent. She was all right. She was always, you knew what you were getting with her. And I find it hard to listen to the album now because it was, you know, such an important album for me back in that summer of 2007. Before my boy was born, I'd be over spending time with my daughters in Italy, and it was before Michael was born, and I remember it was on my iPod. It was the album I played all the time, and I've got so much love for Amy Winehouse and for her music. This, for me, until Jack releases Goliath's debut album, I think this will remain my favourite album of the 21st century.
Interesting. Well, we'll bring Jack in. It was voted, the Guardian music writers, they did a review last year of the century to date, and they voted it the album of the century so far.
It's for me. I can't think of a better album this century than that. Okay.
We've covered an awful lot on there. So Jack, what would you want to add to that, mate?
I mean, there's a lot covered, so there's not too much to discuss apart from maybe my favorite track, and just for example, the fact that Rehab kind of outlines the very behavior that led to, you know, what killed her in the end. It's a hard listen because of that. As you listen to, it's a brutal track. Because it sounds so happy. Again,
it's the contrast, isn't it?
It's the contrast.
Music.
The lyrics.
It's so joyous.
Make you want to cry.
Reminds me quite a lot of what Paul Heaton does with his lyrics and his music.
Yeah.
His music in general is very melodic. You know, it has a lot of light in his music. It's very sort of happy most of the time. But of course, as soon as you hear his lyrics, he's scathing about many things, and Amy seems to be able to do that as well. She drags you in with the sound, and then the lyrics are there to kill you, you know. So it's what was your favourite song on it, Jack?
Wait, before you do that, just touching on what you said, I think Rehab almost reminds me of Gilbert O'Sullivan's "In a Little While From Now." Right? Do you know that track?
I don't know that one, no.
You know, in a little while from now, when I'm not feeling any less sour,
I
promise myself to treat myself and visit in the abide. Sorry.
Everybody in. Come on.
Yeah, that's a great
But
song,
it sounds so cheery, and he's talking about killing himself.
I can't listen to that song. I just can't listen to it.
Oh.
Too painful.
It's horrible.
Well, thanks for
But,
getting Gilbert on the podcast, Jack. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Anyway, my favorite track off this is "He Can Only Hold Her," because I think it's just such a painful, sorrowful song performed so beautifully. I mean, her voice fits it so well. The one of the first lyrics is "He can only hold her for so long. The lights are on, but no one's home," which is
Yeah.
presumably about one of her other partners trying to console her, because obviously her main partner was pretty abusive and
Yeah.
kind of led her down a path that maybe didn't go too well for her. It's just
Okay. But
it's
you
a horrible
love the
album to
album,
listen
yeah.
to, but
I
it's a
guess.
gorgeous album.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. I won't add much to that. I mean, okay, I'll be slightly controversial here, right? Only because the Twitter guys was probably, I think, ended up 53% yes, right? But we actually probably had more comments about this one than pretty much any other
I'm
album we
surprised
voted
at
on.
that.
And they weren't particularly hostile. I mean, we had Easy Peasy on saying, definitely 100%. And we had other guys who have loved a lot of other stuff saying, yeah, I really like it. I just don't think it's, one of the greatest albums ever. And I'm sure there are guys who have listened to it. It didn't feel as if they were sort of making passing comments. So there's obviously something in either our sound or maybe our image or whatever that maybe doesn't quite tick everyone's boxes. Because I thought it was
That's maybe
going
what
to be a lot
I
higher.
referred to at the start. With it, unfortunately, what people remember is the tabloid coverage of her life, and people tend to remember that. Whereas what we really need to be remembering is the music and her, her genius as a lyricist.
Yep.
Also,
Yeah,
what the tabloids did to her was fucking brutal. Like, it was awful.
Well, they killed her, didn't they? Pretty much,
Yeah.
in their own way, So
People in a depressive spiral don't need more hatred.
nope, couldn't agree more, mate. And of course, the upshot of all that was she ended up in the 27 Club,
She did indeed.
which we've talked about in previous podcasts. I
Yeah.
didn't realise, I don't know if this is strictly true, please correct me if it's not, but I read that Me and Mr. Jones was about Nas,
Yeah.
rapper, yeah.
Yep. Made me miss the Slick Rick gig.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Which just there's things I don't know all the
Who's
time.
playing Saturday?
We got we had Naz on previous one, didn't we? Cool. Okay, I think all of the guests, everyone was a yes. I think no, Martin wasn't. No, Martin was. My apologies. Everybody was a yes on this one, and was John.
Yeah, I'd have to just excommunicate any friend of mine who didn't like
Yeah.
this. It's just I couldn't be friends with someone who didn't like this. I just couldn't.
I just want to say no for a joke.
No, Jack, don't do it, mate.
Don't hang up,
Don't
George.
mess with
I
them.
used to think it was a little bit front loaded, the album. If I'm being perfectly honest, I get past tracks maybe 6 or so, and I always thought I thought the rest of the album was fine, but I never quite stuck it out as much as maybe I do other albums. But to be fair, having re-listened to it again the last 2-3 weeks, it's kept me in easily.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they probably just had to work at it a bit more. 35 minutes, which is lovely.
In and out,
mate.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Won Grammys for it. Sold 3.5
but
million.
it's awful. It's one of the things that saddens me most is her breakthrough album was also her final album. It's just not fucking fair. But
not fair, mate. Not fair at all. I did read that at our memorial service, the final song that the crowd all sang was "So Far Away," Carole King. Which I thought was actually quite emotional about.
Started.
Yeah, I know. I got a bit emotional.
well, she used to live round the corner off the Camden Road on. Was it Camden Square? I think she lived. She bought this big house in Camden Square after moving away from Holly Street, and I was going up to a friend's place who lived not far from it a couple of days after she died, and I thought I'm going to pop round, just to see, just sort of pay my respects, just not as a ghoul or anything like that, just as somebody who really loved her music. And I turned onto Camden Square, and I was like, holy shit, you couldn't move in the place.
Right.
For cameras and flowers and people. That was, less than a week after she'd gone. And even now, if I still go down there, there's still flowers outside the house, and there's still memorials to her. So she's still part of Camden's history and folklore, and that'll never change now. She's in with the Bricks in Camden.
Well, I'm going to sort of nod yes on behalf of all of us there, because I think it sounds as if we're absolutely feeling the love, and we'll kind of sign that one and put it in, which I think is well deserved. And my PS to all that was that she, you know, I'm no good. The Arctic Monkeys do an absolutely wonderful cover of it, and I'm a big Arctic Monkeys fan, so anyone that's kind of paid homage to that as well is good enough for me. So,
quick aside, what's your opinion on the newest album from Arctic Monkeys?
it's not my favourite.
It's my least favourite.
Yeah, it's not my favourite, but maybe for another day, mate. But certainly there's others that are better, I think, for sure. Okay, got a couple to go. So Amy's in. We're jumping back to 34 here. So we're going to do, I think it's the second one we've had from Stevie Wonder, Innervisions. Okay, so quote, "We as a people are not interested in baby baby songs anymore. There's more to life than that," Stevie Wonder said in 1972. With Innervisions, Wonder offered a landmark fusion of social realism and spiritual idealism. He brings expressive colour and irresistible funk to his synth-based keyboards on Too High and Higher Ground, both messages of transcendence. The album's centrepiece is Living for the City, a cinematic depiction of exploitation and injustice. Quote, "Innervision gives my own perspective on what's happening in the world," Wonder said. "I think it's my most personal album. I don't care if it sells only 5 copies. So that was the review from Rolling Stone. It was released 3rd of August 1973. It's his 16th studio album. I think it was 24 or something at the time.
It was 2023.
Was it?
22 or 23.
Say that
How
again,
do you
16.
release that many albums?
Because he started, he was at 13.
Did he?
Yeah, little Stevie. Yeah,
That was
absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to do a kind of round the houses on this one because we've got no lead on this. So does anyone want to jump in with a take on Innervisions? And we'll make this one fairly light, quick.
Yeah, it's one of the albums. It's probably a toss up between this and Songs of the Key of Life for my favourite Stevie Wonder album. It starts off quite. It's a tricky one. It doesn't start off all guns blazing. It sort of just winds you in and it drags you in. And by the time you get into the third track, Living for the City, it's like, all right, okay. And I don't think it was as well received as previous albums.
Wasn't? No.
But that song itself, that is one of the most scabrous, brutal lyrics he ever wrote. There's no holding back there, and it's such a tune. I love it to bits. But the full version, the cops sort of arresting him, sticking him in the cell and stuff. It's very, very different from the single version, but it's still probably one of the singles of the 70s. Now you get into the second side of the album with Higher Ground is just one of the great grooves of all time. Jesus, Children of America, another great song as well, but it finishes with 2 absolute killer pop songs. Don't You Worry About a Thing is just, that just transcends, the 70s and beyond. It's a song that people have been listening to and will continue listening to. One of the great grooves again, and He's Mr. Know-All's just very knowing, very, it takes its time when it gets to that bit and he starts rolling. Ba, 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 ba.
Yeah.
It's there's a major talent at work here. Now, a couple of days after he released it, he get almost wiped out in a car crash. Get hit. I think it was a truck that was carrying logs or something. Smashed into the car. It went through his head, and his head was like.
That's right. I read that.
Yeah, he nearly died just a couple of days after this, and people just thought that's him. Maybe Stevie will never get back, especially with the damage that he had. He had big scars in his head, and his brain was in a coma for a while as well. So, but he did come back, and he came back with a vengeance. And at the time, as I say, he was only 22, 23 tops, and he's just one of the most talented fellas, and he played
all the instruments, didn't he?
Everything on these, but he was using that Tonto keyboard
We
thing,
did, yeah.
which I still don't understand. But
Yeah, I started reading about that and then thought,
yeah,
nah.
it's very complicated. But I think the only person he hired would be electric bass players. So we only get electric bass players in and some female backing vocals, but the rest of the stuff's him. It's all him.
I think he's got
Incredibly talented fella.
I think David T. Walker plays electric guitar on it, who was like a go-to session guy in the 70s because he plays on What's Going On and a number
I
of
don't know
other
if
things.
Michael Cimbello played on this
I
album.
think he did, yeah. But there's not
Because
many,
Michael
George, you're
Cimbello
right.
was
Yeah.
one of his go-to guys. He definitely played a lot on songs in the Key of Life. But yeah, big album for me, and I can get back to this time and time again. So yes.
So don't you worry about a thing, but you prefer the Incognito cover, right?
No.
You
I like it. It's a good cover, but yeah, but it's no.
Okay.
No.
Lisa, Jack, what would you want to add to that on Innervisions?
I completely disagree with the last track. I listened to the album a few times, and of all the tracks in the album, he's Mr. Know-It-All. I didn't love. I've written down a wee bit about it, but I think I can't quite put my finger on why it didn't kind of hook me in as much. It something about the particular melody or song structure just didn't hook me in. I can't get that. But the track before it, of course, though, I do agree. Don't You Worry About a Thing starts with like an excellent groove that forms the backbeat for the track, and the vocals in it are gorgeous, double tracked, smooth, lush. And there's also a round at one point where he develops a vocal part and then repeats it and adds the vocal, and then a beat later repeats the same vocal part, and it creates this lovely part. And then just in case you were getting bored, he adds a counter melody of Todo Está Bien Chévere. It's a great track. So much ear candy to keep you going.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the last track, Mr. Know-It-All, is apparently about Richard Nixon. So back to that kind of very light, fluffy. That is kind of almost sort of middle of the road, almost the song, the tune and stuff. But the lyrics were, pretty scathing if you boil into what 73 or so Nixon, what he was doing, that whole Watergate thing, and all the other stuff around that. His side two is quite different. Side one, side two is fairly mellow in sound, but I think the lyrics themselves are still pretty powerful straight through it. Lisa, what else do you want to add on?
I don't really think there's much I can add to all of that.
Do you like it?
Sorry?
Do you like it?
Oh yeah, other than to agree that it's a great album that I will always go back to. It's just such a great collection of songs, and I just find it incredible, that he played almost everything on the album with the production. It's his songs, and just a great album, quite incredible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I probably missed this one a little bit. I was quite late coming to Wonder. I might have mentioned that last time. And even when I did, I kind of moved past this one a little bit, which might be part of what George and Jack said, which is there's not a superstition on it. There's nothing like that you just put it on.
I think Living for the City, Higher Ground.
I think they are, George. I think they're as good.
Absolute killer.
And Don't You Worry About a Thing.
It just didn't grab me as quickly maybe as one or two killer tracks did in the other albums, but you're right, I think the depth of the songs are unbelievable once you actually get into them, and you had sort of Streisand covering tracks off it, and if Streisand's picking up your stuff and covering it, you're doing it in real time. She released All in Love is Fair, sorry. She did that in 74, I think, and had a big hit with it, and I think that was the respect he was getting as a songwriter at that time.
Yeah.
Definitely had his chops on it. I think it's great. He won a Grammy for this, which was his second in a row after Talking Book. There's a really nice quote because he actually ended up winning 3 Grammys in a row because he won one for Songs the Key of Life as well.
Yeah.
But the quote's interesting because the way they were released, he didn't have a Grammy nomination in 76, I think it was, 75. I can't remember the gap year. And then Songs in Key of Life.
It was 75 because Songs in Key of Life was 76.
So he does say Fullness, for Fullness and Finale, and then he had Songs in Key of Life. But the guy who won it in the gap year was Paul Simon for Still Crazy After All These Years, I think.
Yeah.
and his acceptance speech was, "I'd just like to thank Stevie Wonder for not releasing an album this year." Which, bearing in mind, Simon was a bit of a songwriter, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Really like
But
that.
he recognised Stevie's talent. So
He did indeed. Cool.
Also,
okay.
one thing about
Go on, Jack.
one thing about Living for a City, just before we go as well, is it does take a while to build. But one thing I noticed that was odd about the track is that the primary balance around the track is the bass. It's the loudest thing in the track, almost the whole way through. It's quite
pulsing,
it's-
yeah.
It's quite odd, the fact that that's the loudest thing that you can hear. But it's a good part. It sounds really great and unique.
Yeah, and it's back to that kind of New York feel to it. It's almost like kind of buzzy, atmospheric thing going on, isn't there? Yeah, I was transfixed by it. 44 minutes long, the highest Twitter poll we've ever had, 96%.
Wow.
Oh,
So it's only 4%, George, this time, mate.
They're fucking idiots.
Fucking idiots. But everyone who commented in one or two side comments absolutely loved it. Just want to read a quick comment from one of our guests, and then we can have a quick vote. So David said, it was quite interesting, this one. Stevie Wonder, he said, early 80s, I started going out with this posh girl. She played tennis and went to a private school. I lived in Onthank and was basically a scumbag. Anyway, she eventually came round to mine in my bedroom, turns her nose up at my Ramones, Jam, Clash records. She brought two of her own, Journey Through the Life of Plants and Innervisions. Put these on, she commands. I read the sleeve notes on the back of one of them, some wanky pseudo-religious bollocks about 1 + 1 equals the shining light of the heavenly creator or something. I didn't play it. The relationship was dead before it even got going, but I was too good for her. Anyway, the Stevies got slung like they were discs in a pigeon chute, and I still never listened to either of them. So no to Stevie Wonder, even if that's sacrilege.
What
It
the
is.
fuck?
David.
what do you
I
mean
know.
by Ask Lisa?
About Onthanks?
Onthank.
On thank.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, so I was brought up just over the scheme in New Farm Loch,
Okay.
and my mother did her.
Lisa, you were never brought up in a scheme. Let's be honest. Come on. You were
I did
not
leave
brought up
those.
in a scheme.
Listen, I moved to Partick when I was 4.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
That's
those
your
formative years that you had,
Partick
right?
then wasn't what it is now.
Yeah, but you still had falafel, right? Come on, let's be honest.
Are you
You could take-
joking?
I couldn't even pronounce falafel at 30.
Could take the girl at Ayrshire, right? Okay, cool. So we had no from David. We had a no from Chris. We had
Oh,
a
really?
yeah.
Just
We
a
had
lot of nose.
yeah, I know. Martin wasn't sure about it, so he sat in the middle. Skin was in for sure. John was in, loved it as well.
Yeah.
So well, a couple there that you know aren't jumping up and down about it, but I'd say probably 50-50 from the other guys. Okay, so who started? George?
Yeah, 100%. And
We're in, mate. Jack?
now I'm having words with David Ross.
I know, I thought you'd like that. Jack,
I'm in, yeah.
you're in. Cheers, mate. Thank you. Lisa?
It has to be in.
Yeah, and I'm going to put it in. So when we started this and I saw the ones on the list, I actually prefer Talking Book, but having listened to this over the last 3-4
You
weeks
probably
again,
prefer this now.
I probably do if I'm being honest. So I'll probably change my
Yeah.
mind if we've got one more on the list to come. So
It's songs in the key of life.
songs of Key of Life. Do you know what's a PS to all that
Spoiler
stuff?
alert! Spoiler alert!
Spoiler alert! Yeah, and it's pretty high up as well.
Yeah, it will be.
I had a wee bit of spare time this week, and I think it was Tuesday. I think the rain wasn't so good Monday, and I actually sat and watched them. Well, you know what it's like in Inverclyde. And I sat and watched the Glastonbury gig that he did in 2010. It's on YouTube. I'm sure I watched a bit of it at the time, but you know, back in sats like 90 minutes, whatever. It's brilliant. I'm not always a fan of it. He obviously extends out some of the songs and stuff, but you know, it's fantastic when he does it. But I'm not always a fan when he kicks it too much. But the song selections are brilliant. I think he does 3 off this record, and he does an amazing cover of We Can Work It Out, and
that was a great cover. Yeah, it was
one of the best covers for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, if it rains in the winter and you want to watch something, I wouldn't put you off. It's brilliant. Okay, so we are going to finish on a high tonight. This is going to take us to a new level.
If there's any no's on this, I'm going to be very, very, very surprised.
So, Jack, we've had a bit of an issue with jazz.
What do you mean?
And I'm speaking for the guys on the podcast tonight, but also one or two of our compadres who are missing. We haven't quite managed to get it yet.
But
And George is shaking his head already. You'll get every chance,
No.
Mr. Patterson.
no, because you know I'm a jazz man. I like my jazz.
We
So
did
we're-
get Bitches Brew.
Managed to vote out Bitches Brew. We managed to vote
Bitches Brew is being more difficult though.
I found that really hard.
If Bitches Brew is like the Aphex Twin to this, like Fred Again, this is trying to be jazzy but still catering to the pop senses almost.
Love that.
Bitches
Love
Brew
that.
is very, very out there.
You
And
need to know your
accessible.
jazz, I think, to really get into that.
You've got
Anyway,
your soulmate, George. We had Jack on 6
Yeah,
months
I
ago,
mean,
mate.
Jack. High five, Jack.
Boom.
Don't leave me
But-
hanging, man.
Bitches Brew is tough, but we also voted out I Love Supreme, by the way. So,
Yeah, I know. I
which
never voted
I think
for
I'm
that.
one or two sleepless nights about that. But Mr. Welsh hasn't, to be fair. Right, okay, so the last one tonight is 31, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. So, this painterly masterpiece is one of the most important, influential and popular albums in jazz. At the time it was made, Kind of Blue was also a revolution all of its own. Turning his back on standard chord progressions, trumpeter Miles Davis used modal scales as a starting point for composition and improvisation, breaking new ground with warmth, subtlety and understatement in the thick of hard bop. Davis and his peerless band, bassist Paul Chambers, drummer Jimmy Cobb, pianist Bill Evans and the Titanic sax team of John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley, soloed in uncluttered settings typified by melodic rather than harmonic variation, as Davis put it. Two numbers, all blues and Freddie Freeloader, are in 12-bar form, but Davis's approach allowed his players a cool new collective freedom. So that's the last one for tonight. Kind of Blue, Miles Davis, released 17th of August 1959. George, help us to get Miles Davis on the list
Well,
here. Come on.
You know, with any luck, you'll have Miles Davis and John Coltrane finally in the Hall of Fame, because
Of course.
it was hard, because listening to Bitches Brew, if you listen to Bitches Brew in isolation, you would, and you thought that's Miles Davis. Honestly, I think that would put a lot of people off the sound of Miles Davis. But it's hard to distill an entire career into one single album. But if you want to know what Miles Davis, the feel of Miles Davis, and that sort of pure horn sound that he had, this is where you would start, or I would suggest you would start here. You know, it's that sound. It's the sound of Miles Davis's horn and his his collaborators here, John Coltrane and Julian Cannonball Adderley and Bill
Great name.
Evans and Jimmy Cobb. Yes, yeah, phenomenal player. But each of those guys was virtuoso in their own right. And it gave him the space to deliver something that was a step away from the bebop, a Charlie Parker, somewhere just south of cool jazz. And it's no an exaggeration to say it's probably one of the most important jazz records ever made, even though Davis himself sort of turned his nose up at it later on. But you've got great tracks in there. So What opens up the album, and that's just like jazz standard. Is it Blues and Green, I think?
Yeah.
And All
that.
Blues as well. Those are just, I can go back and listen to them time and time again. It's the sound of Miles Davis and John Coltrane, for that matter. It's instantly recognisable to me as like a Hendrix solo. As soon as they start playing, I know it's them. And I really, really love these compositions. And it's the kind of music that I used to listen to years ago and didn't really understand. I used to listen to it, think, yeah, this is what I should be listening to in coffee shops and wet Friday afternoons. It's only later on that I really get into it and appreciated that and coffee for what it was really worth. But yeah, I love this. This is a great album. And I would urge anyone not to start at Bitches Brew. Please start at Kind of Blue. Then
Okay.
go Sketches of Spain after that.
Yeah. So he'd done 30 odd studio albums by the time this came out.
Yeah.
Because he'd been around, hadn't he? He played with some of the greats, of course.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
served
yeah.
his time, right?
He was a proper hard bebopper back in the
Yeah,
day. But
he was.
this is where this sort of cool, this cool jazz, late
Yep.
50s, perfect, birth of the cool stuff. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. A couple of things to add to that, but we'll get around to the rest of the guys. Jack, you sound as if you're going to have some trouble with us if we don't vote it in. So tell us why, mate.
Well, this is an album that I think I first listened to when I was like 10 years of age, and I mean, obviously,
Which is only 10 years ago, to be fair, Jack.
I don't know why I feel like that was like 5 years ago. I don't think I quite have a grasp on time yet. But yeah,
Good.
so I think, you know, when I listened to it then, I obviously didn't appreciate it because I was a Wayne. But you know, as I listened to it more and more as I grew up, I slowly started to appreciate the rhythm, the percussion, the particular way the melody built, and I think it has some of my favorite tracks on it. Well, I say favorite track. My favorite track on it is Freddie Freeloader. Freddie Freeloader, which I feel like is a track that gets overlooked a lot. I
Yeah.
like the particular way it meanders and it slowly goes through this gorgeous melody. It's not an album to be overlooked. Absolutely, it totally gets that sound down to a T. I mean, all the instrumentation on it is gorgeous.
See, I think Freddie Freeloader's the only one that Bill Evans didn't play on. I think it's the only track he didn't
That's
play
right.
on.
There was the other pianist played on that one. Yeah, who
can't
used to
remember his
play
name,
with
though.
him. He used to play with him. Evans came in and then he brought him back in for this song. And I think he also played a bit live with him as well at the
Right.
time.
Sorry, Jack.
Yeah, that's right, mate. That's right. And other jazz stuff, Jack, would you be listening to other great jazz records? Is that a thing or?
I don't listen to enough
No.
jazz. I do
Right.
need to move on to jazz properly. I listen to a lot of stuff that's around jazz and takes inspiration from it, but I don't listen to enough direct jazz.
Okay, no bother. So yes, a couple of things. He'd done these albums. This is his classic lineup. Recorded in 30th Street Studio in New York. I think 2 sessions. I think that they've done.
9 hours studio time.
9 hours studio time, Lisa. Thank you.
Incredible.
No messing about.
No messing about for sure. And also the same studio that they recorded West Side Story in. The
Around
soundtrack.
about the same kind of time, yeah.
Yeah, and more interestingly, George, a large part of The Wall, Pink Floyd.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
not long before it shut down. So, so
That
also
probably did it.
absolutely, yeah, and a couple of guys absolutely loving them. So back to us not loving jazz per se, but some of the quotes, if you read up on this at all, there's like a who's who of people saying how great and influential, and not all just jazz guys, just people who absolutely love it. I loved one from Quincy Jones. I think Quincy Jones said, I play this every day. It's my orange juice.
Okay.
So I don't
And
think
I think he doesn't mean Edwin Collins.
I was about to say, not to be confused with the band Orange Juice.
No.
And happy birthday to Mr. Collins, of course.
Yeah, happy birthday, Edwin Collins, today. Yes.
Absolutely.
Is it?
Just as
That's
an
a
aside.
weird coincidence.
I know, couldn't make it up. And Q-Tip, sort of fairly well-renowned rapper, said it's like the Bible in America. You have to have one in every house, a copy of the album.
Yeah.
So I think it does transcend whatever it is. It's just got a sting in it that seems to just touch everyone.
It is unique.
It's a bit. Lisa, is Kind of Blue unique for you?
Well, it's unique because I don't normally listen to jazz.
Okay.
If I'm honest, I've really enjoyed listening to it. I did listen to it at the time we were reviewing Witch's Brew.
Yeah.
And because I just was like frustrated with myself. I thought, why can't I get that? This is really, really discordant and I don't understand it. So I thought, right, I need to go back, and I listened to that, and I remember thinking, oh good, that's coming up soon. So I really enjoyed that. It's amazing that it was recorded in 9 hours of studio time. But I think it's just that the musicians that play with him are just such, I don't know, they're just so consummate that he gave them chords and just allowed, am I right here? He just allowed them to improvise.
Flow, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And-
We give them a
and-
like a frame of what he was
Yeah, he gave them the
thinking for,
chords
and then
the
they filled
frame,
the
and
book.
they and just said, right, let's do it. And I think for that reason, that's why, because they're so good, the music just flows. And I know jazz aficionados would say, oh no, it's not just easy listening, because it's not. But obviously they see things in it that I don't. But for somebody that's quite new to it, I found it incredibly easy listening. And I think a very good introduction to jazz.
That's what I've been saying, Lisa. I've been saying this for so long, and
Yes.
nobody's listening to me.
Yes.
Jesus.
I always listen to you, George.
We always listen, George. We just don't always agree. That's all.
You know, the first track, that really sumptuous bass.
So what? Yeah, so was
comes in
Brilliant.
and a bit of subtle piano leading up to his solo. I mean, it's just wonderful stuff, and I think it just draws you right in. And you know, I love having it round about me. You know, I've been listening to that quite a lot this week, so that's my take on it.
Yeah, me too. I'm no way a jazz aficionado at all. I wish a little bit that we maybe. I think it absolutely deserves. I know we'll do a vote, but I can see why it's so high up on the list. But I wish we'd had it earlier on the list to make us listen to this and then go back to Bitches Brew and Love Supreme. And is my take on it, really. I'm sure if it was the other way around, we might have voted one or two others into the list. But we didn't.
And it still feels very fresh.
Yeah, agree.
Love that blue and green. Absolutely wonderful. I know they're not all songs per se, but you know, as pieces of music, but blue and green's wonderful. Something about it's great. This was surprisingly very popular on Twitter. I wasn't too sure how the guys would pick this one up, but 83% were big thumbing up on this one. Nick Portnell said this one In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew should all be in the top 100, and I know nothing about jazz. So next view was.
You must know more than me.
But these are guys I think are much more a bit more sort of rock and pop fans generally, and they're all still sort of crashing into the top 100, which is fantastic. A couple of other things I picked up. Yeah, so I had this heroin addiction, didn't he, off and on, and didn't really get rid of it. Yeah, he beat it eventually, but at this point it was. You know, it was kind of touch and go for a while, which again is amazing that you managed to produce something like this at this time. Played the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970.
Well, the famous Isle of Wight Festival, one of the greatest concerts of all time.
Yeah, 600,000 people and all that. But of course, Bitches Brew took him into that whole psychedelic jazz thing and all that, didn't it? Which is fantastic. And I'm pretty sure I read that Ron Carter also plays with him. Who was on the Tribe Called Quest record, if you remember, and I really liked that connection.
Couple of weeks ago.
Fantastic. Cool. The guys were Martin didn't know it. Everyone else was a yes. I know.
How do you not know?
Well, he's too busy being Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie and Filthy Tongues
and
all
all
that,
tongues,
right? All the cracking stuff. But he said, no, I'm aware of it, but I don't want to vote on it. It's unfair.
No,
I think it's fair. Some of the guys are parking some of their votes now if they're neither yes or not, which I think is fair, I think. So the other guys were all yes, including Mr. Welsh. And the reason I mention that is it's the first podcast that John had a full house of every album. Which he was quite surprised at, so okay, right, let's try and see if we can get a full house here. So George, double thumbs.
Thumbs up for me, mate.
Jack, double thumbs. Go on, Lisa. Oh man,
just push them down just to ruin it.
I know. I that is everyone in who has actually voted on that is your yes.
Wow.
We're long overdue, I think, and maybe we'll get some more listeners back. All the jazz guys that have all patched us over the last days.
So have we got a grand slam tonight? Have we got the absolute?
So for the first time, what are we now?
Ever.
Was that 35 to 30? Was that? And we have We
Yeah,
have voted in 5 for 5, which must be Jack's influence, I think.
it must be, yeah.
Yeah, I should have got you on before, Jack. Don't know what I'd done without you. My only other PS to that before we do a wrap up is that, and again, if I knew this, I totally missed it, was that he plays the trumpet on O Patti by Scritti Politti.
Pretty polite, yeah, okay.
Ooh.
I genuinely had no idea about that.
No, I didn't know that either.
So yeah,
But his wife, I know something as well about Miles Davis. If his wife was a woman called Betty Davis, and she was
but not the Betty Davis.
no
No.
Betty Davis, the funk singer.
Yeah.
Jesus, check her out. She is phenomenal, man.
Yeah.
She got a song called Anti-Love Song. After this show, go and listen to Anti-Love Song by Betty Davis. It's incredible. She was a superstar in her own right, and then she just disappeared.
Yeah.
She's died recently as well, but she was massive. I loved Betty Davis.
Stuart Cosgrove's a big fan. Betty Davis.
I know.
Yeah, he calls her out. So I've scribbled that one down. I'll get it back in my playlist, mate. So thank you very much. Cool. So I don't need to summarise those because for the first time we have a full house, and they're not all no's either. They're all yeses. So maybe we should just quit now and not do any more, or keep John off the podcast. Maybe that's a
no. We need his jerseys back. Sharpish.
Needs jerseys back. Okay, so we've done 5. Great fun as always. One of the things that we've still got to do is all our guests get to nominate an album for us to consider when we get to the end of the current list to see if we want to add that one on. So Jack, I know you've been giving it some deliberation, mate. So which album are you going to nominate, please?
So I'm going to give you the album from the band Black Country New Road, Ants from Up There, which is the last album that their main singer sang on before he left.
Because
mental health issues. He left to work on himself.
And why have you nominated the album? What makes you love it so much?
It takes a lot of influence from jazz sources, from contemporary sources. A lot of the members of the band were from like a kind of conservatoire background, like classically trained. I think actually one of them is from conservatoire because they're also in the band Jockstrap, if you know Jockstrap.
Okay.
They're very good. Anyway, yeah, so this album has a bit of everything in it. It's got some pop, it's got some jazz, it's got kind of almost classical the way it builds and it crescendos.
It's a bit proggy, I think, isn't it, in places? But proggy.
In some places proggy, but I think
I'll like that, George.
If you don't rate it in to top 100, I might cry.
So my son will love you for nominating that, Jack. He loves.
Does he like BCNR?
He loves Black Country New Road. Absolutely loves them, right up there. So
that's possibly my favorite album of all time. Like before that, it was Funeral by Arcade Fire, but this took it over.
And was that the one that you were swaying over, Funeral?
It was Funeral. But I thought also you'll probably all have heard Funeral by Arcade Fire.
We have. It's a fine album. But lovely, Black Country New Road, that's brilliant. We'll put it on the list. It adds to that eclectic guests list of nominations we've had, which is fantastic. So I'm sure we'll all get our ears around those over the next few weeks. Cool. So the next 5 then for our next episode, because we are getting down to the sharp end, top 30 now.
The tickly bit.
The tickly bit, indeed.
Have you done To Pimp a Butterfly yet?
We haven't, no. I think it comes up further down the list, Jack.
Yeah, because it is one of the best albums of all time.
We might squeeze you back on, mate, for a drop-in appearance.
I'd be happy to be on for that episode, certainly.
You can just come on for the one album and go again, right? Okay, so the next 5
Jack has to come back on. Jack has to come back on when he records his own album, because that will no doubt be in 20 years' time when we revisit this.
Yeah,
we'll all be even older than we are at the moment, and Jack will have at least a couple of albums, and one of his debut album will be on this.
Well, listen, Jack, one of the things, I know you're aspiring to do more live shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're going to do somewhere down the line is a greatest live albums list. Okay. So if you can hurry up with that, we'll try and try and get you on it, right?
I do have a show in December 2nd, supporting the BMX Bandits, actually.
Oh,
what a combo!
Yeah, are you going to do your cover of Series Drugs or?
I think I might.
Yeah,
It'll be a good song to do.
I think Douglas would like
Where's
that.
this taking place, Jack?
It's the Hug and Pint in Glasgow.
Oh,
Hug and Pint
fantastic.
in Glasgow. I think we'll have to make that a Christmas night out.
That sounds like
Yep.
Love the Hug and Pint as well. Perfect. Brilliant. Thanks, mate. So the next 5 we have to review are Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? The Beatles, White Album stroke the Beatles. The Wu-Tang Clan, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers.
Oh,
Exactly. D'Angelo, Voodoo,
Oh.
and Patti Smith, Horses.
Oh.
Okay, so that's the next 5. As ever, eclectic is the word that springs to mind. Guys, have we missed anything off for tonight? Are we good with that? 5 for 5.
Delighted.
Fantastic.
good.
Me too. Jack, again, can't thank you enough, mate. Absolutely brilliant to see you. Good luck with all the stuff that you do, and hopefully we'll see you in December at the gig.
thank you.
Lisa, thanks for crashing your pre-holiday preparation, and have a brilliant holiday. And
I'm
guys,
ready to
we'll
run off and pack a case very
I know.
quickly.
feeling very guilty. Have a brilliant time, and guys, we'll all catch up very soon. Stay safe till next time. All the best. Take care.
Thanks all.